The coffee shop bustled with the usual hum of the afternoon. People sat at small tables, sipping their drinks, typing away on laptops, or chatting in low voices. The sound of steam rising from the espresso machine mixed with the occasional clink of cups. Outside, the world was moving fast, but inside, it felt like time slowed down. In the corner of the shop, at a small round table by the window, sat an elderly man. He looked to be in his late 70s or early 80s, his frame thin but sturdy. His weathered face was lined with wrinkles, each one telling a story of a life well lived and well fought. His hair, now mostly gray, was neatly combed under a faded cap that bore a military insignia, a symbol of a time long past. He sat with a quiet dignity, as though the weight of the years hadn't dulled his spirit. Despite the years on his body, there was an undeniable strength in the way he carried himself. He wasn't really paying attention to the chatter around him, lost in his thoughts as he slowly stirred his coffee. His hands trembled slightly, a sign of age, but his eyes remained sharp and steady, observing the world quietly. At the door, the bell jingled as a man in his mid-30s entered. He was well-dressed in a crisp suit, exuding an air of confidence. His movements were quick, his steps almost too sure of themselves. He glanced around, scanning the room, before his eyes landed on the elderly man in the corner. A smirk tugged at the corners of his lips. He looked the veteran up and down, his worn-out coat, the wrinkles that marked his face, the military cap, and let out a quiet, condescending laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was enough for those around to hear. The kind of laugh that mocked, that pitied. The kind of laugh that spoke volumes without a word. As the rude man's laughter echoed through the coffee shop, the camera slowly panned to the elderly veteran's face. His expression remained calm, his posture straight, but there was something in his eyes. Something deep. The years had carved lines into his face, but his gaze was sharp and filled with a quiet intensity. It was as though behind those eyes, a lifetime of memories lived, each one heavier than the last. For a brief moment the scene blurred, and the viewer was transported to another time, a different place. A flash of a young man in uniform, standing tall under a blazing sun. The roar of battle filled the air. Gunfire echoed across the field as the soldier, barely out of his teens, clutched his rifle, eyes scanning the horizon for an enemy he could barely see. The dirt beneath his boots was soaked with more than just sweat. It was soaked with the weight of survival. The flash faded, and the veteran's face returned to the present, but the memory lingered. In the flashbacks, there were moments of victory, but there were many more moments of pain and loss. The veteran had been a part of something much larger than himself. A force that fought in places most would never go. There were soldiers lost to the chaos of war, men he'd known, men he'd called brothers, and with each fallen comrade, a piece of his own heart had been buried in the dirt. Despite the horrors he'd witnessed, despite the toll it had taken on his body and soul, there was pride in his heart. Pride in the service he had given, in the sacrifices made, in the lives he'd saved. His uniform may have been worn, but his resolve had never been broken. The memories of those days didn't fade. They only grew sharper with time. They were a part of him, as much as the wrinkles on his face or the tremors in his hands. Back in the coffee shop, the rude man's mocking remarks continued. His laughter grew louder, and his voice more obnoxious. But the veteran remained silent. The younger man spoke as though he hadn't noticed the sting of his words. "Look at this guy. Still wearing that cap, pretending like he's a hero," the man scoffed. "You can't be a hero when you're this old. What's he even doing here, huh?" Each snide comment from the rude man seemed to strike a chord, but the veteran didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes darkened ever so slightly. The years of training and discipline had taught him to control his emotions, but something in the rude man's taunts, something in the way he spoke without understanding, pushed him to the edge. The veteran's hands gripped the edge of his coffee cup a little tighter. The tremor in his hands had nothing to do with age anymore. It was the weight of the past creeping in, threatening to surface. His breath remained steady, his gaze unwavering. He didn't respond. He simply sat there as if waiting for something that only time could bring, something inevitable. The younger man, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the veteran, continued his mockery. thinking that the old man's silence was a sign of weakness. What he didn't know was that the veteran had seen much worse than any insult or laugh. He'd seen death, and he'd faced it. And this was nothing compared to the battles he'd fought long ago. The rude man's laughter grew louder, more confident. He took a few steps toward the elderly veteran, clearly enjoying the power he felt over the old man's silence. With every step, his mocking tone grew, as if pushing for a reaction he thought he could easily provoke. "Hey, Grandpa, you hear me? Or are you just too old to get it?" the man sneered. "You think anyone cares about your old war stories? No one does, not anymore." The veteran's hands shook, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of old memories, a history of wounds both seen and unseen. The tremors were the echoes of battles fought long ago, the physical reminder of a past that still lingered. His fingers gripped the coffee cup a little tighter as he slowly set it down, his knuckles turning white. The old man didn't answer. Instead, he took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling slowly, gathering himself. His back straightened, and though the lines of age had weakened his body, his spirit remained unbroken. Slowly he stood, his movements deliberate, careful, as if every motion had a purpose. The younger man, still smirking, took a few more steps forward, closing the gap between them. "What, you're gonna do something about it, old man? You can't even stand up without shaking." He was too close now, too sure of his superiority. He didn't see the shift in the air, the quiet storm that had been brewing in the veteran's eyes. What the rude man didn't understand was that the veteran had faced far worse in his life. He had walked through hell and come out the other side. He had seen fear and destruction up close. And yet, here he stood, still breathing, still standing. The veteran's eyes locked onto the man's, a calm intensity burning behind them. The younger man took another step, but something in the veteran's gaze stopped him in his tracks. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with the weight of years of experience, pain, and loss. Finally, the veteran spoke, his voice low and steady. "You don't know who you're speaking to." The words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that the rude man had never expected. There was no anger in the voice, just a quiet authority that stopped the man from moving any closer. The simple statement hung in the air, making the rude man pause, suddenly uncertain. The veteran stood tall, though his frail body trembled. His eyes never left the younger man, and for the first time, the rude man realized that this old man was more than just a relic of the past. He was someone who had lived through things that could never be mocked away. The veteran turned and walked away without a second glance at the rude man. His back was straight, his pace steady, though his steps were slow. He didn't need to say anything more. He had already made his point. The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh as the tension slowly dissipated. The rude man, however, stood frozen for a moment, watching the old man leave. He shook his head, dismissing it all with a shrug. "What a joke," he muttered under his breath, as if the whole encounter had been nothing more than a trivial interruption in his day. He gave one final look at the veteran's retreating form, thinking that the old man was just some lonely, forgotten relic of the past. With a sneer, he turned to walk away, unaware that what was about to happen would be far more than he could ever expect. It began with a small thing. His phone slipped out of his hand as he fumbled for his wallet. The phone dropped with a soft thud, then slid right into a puddle of water near the entrance. "Great," he muttered, crouching down to pick it up. He wiped it off, but the screen had already cracked. A curse escaped his lips, but he quickly brushed it off, still convinced the day was his. But as he straightened up, his coffee cup, half full and sitting on the table, tipped over. The hot liquid splashed across his chest, staining his crisp white shirt and suit jacket. "Seriously?" he hissed, the frustration creeping into his voice. He looked down at the mess, wiping the coffee from his shirt, his face flushed with embarrassment. He had just been mocked by an old man, and now he was the one looking ridiculous. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. As he stormed toward the door, muttering under his breath, his shoe caught on the edge of the rug by the door. He stumbled, arms flailing in the air as he tried to regain his balance. The entire shop seemed to hold its breath. For a moment everything was in slow motion until he crashed into the doorframe with a loud thud, sending his coffee cup flying off the table and scattering its contents across the floor. The man stood there, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. His well-tailored suit was now ruined, his phone useless, and his pride completely shattered. The few customers who had witnessed the series of unfortunate events couldn't help but glance in his direction, some with sympathy, others with barely contained amusement. Through the door, the veteran had stepped into the cool air of the outside world. His hands were in his pockets, his head held high as he made his way down the street, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He didn't turn back, but for some reason, he felt a quiet satisfaction wash over him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't seeking revenge. He simply knew that, in time, karma would always find its way. The camera shifted, showing the rude man standing still, his confidence crumbling around him. His gaze drifted to the mess he'd made, the laughter and chatter around him turning to whispers. For the first time, he realized that things weren't always as they seemed. There was more to life than arrogance and mockery. And sometimes the consequences of his actions, no matter how small, could come crashing down at once. Karma had a way of striking when you least expected it. As the veteran walked down the street, the bustling sounds of the town faded behind him. The cool air brushed against his face as he made his way toward the park, his footsteps slow but purposeful. His eyes were distant, lost in memories, as he moved past the familiar sights, the old bookstore, the corner bakery, the quiet streets that had once echoed with the sounds of young soldiers marching to war. He had lived in this town for years now, a quiet, unassuming figure. Most people didn't recognize him. He wasn't a hero in their eyes anymore, just another elderly man who'd seen better days. Yet in truth, he was something far more than that, a decorated war hero, whose name had once been known across the nation. But as time passed, the world had forgotten. The medals and honors he'd earned had collected dust on a shelf, the stories of bravery fading into the background of history. Unbeknownst to him, the man he'd just encountered, so full of arrogance and disdain, was more closely connected to him than either of them realized. The rude man, still standing in the coffee shop, was the son of a local business owner. His father, now long gone, had served in the very same war as the veteran. They had fought in the same battles, faced the same horrors. But there was something the rude man didn't know. Years ago, during one of the darkest days of the war, the veteran had saved the man's father. A bullet had nearly ended the business owner's life, but the veteran had risked everything to pull him out of the line of fire. That act of heroism, that split-second decision, had ensured that the man's father lived to return home and build a life. The rude man had never known this. To him, the veteran was just an old man, nothing more than a relic of a forgotten time. And so when he laughed and mocked him, he did so without any awareness of the deep connection between their lives. Karma, however, wasn't just about misfortune. In this case, it was an unexpected reckoning, a twist of fate. The universe had a way of making things right, even if it took decades. The veteran's quiet strength, his resilience, had been tested in ways the rude man could never understand. But now, with the strange series of misfortunes that had befallen the younger man, it seemed that the past had come full circle. The veteran sat on a weathered bench in the park, his back straight, his eyes focused on the setting sun. The orange and pink hues painted the sky, casting a calm glow over everything. The day was coming to a close, and there was a peaceful silence around him, as if the world itself had paused for a moment. He breathed in deeply, the cool air filling his lungs, and felt a quiet contentment settle over him. He didn't need to say anything more. He didn't need to confront the rude man or explain himself. The universe had already done its work. The lesson had been taught, not through words, but through actions and consequences. As he sat there, the rude man walked past, his head hung low in shame. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility that had only come with the weight of his actions. He didn't look at the veteran. There was no need for apologies. The veteran simply watched him pass, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The narrator's voice softly filled the silence, reflecting on the idea of karma. Sometimes, the narrator mused, the universe balances things in ways we can't predict. In the end, no one can escape the consequences of their actions, and sometimes, just sometimes, things work out on their own. The sun dipped below the horizon, and everything felt right. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. This story reminds us that actions have consequences, and sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out in ways we can't always predict. The power of karma is real, and this tale shows us that even the smallest actions can lead to unexpected results. If you enjoyed this story and felt the impact of its message, please take a moment to like this video. Comment below with your thoughts, and share it with others who might need to hear it too. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss out on more thought-provoking stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.